Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hirewell Recruiting Insights podcast, brought to you live via LinkedIn Live. I'm your host, James Hornick, partner at Hirewell. Joining me is Fish superfan and the newest partner recently promoted, Jeff Smith.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, congratulations.
I appreciate that.
I want to mention that.
Yeah.
I have a little story before we get started. You want to hear this one?
I do.
So, are you familiar with my Saturday LinkedIn activities?
Yes, and you've pinged me when I'm also working on Saturday and said that it's nice to see other people working on Saturday in our company.
Yeah, so I every Saturday, those people who actually follow me on LinkedIn will probably know I just troll. It's just I'm never serious on a Saturday. Whatever I post is always a joke. I've been on the internet for a long time. I love just like messing around, but LinkedIn's so stuffy. But you don't want to do that all the time because it's not really the forum for it. But Saturday is usually my day to let loose. I had one little bit backfire, so it was didn't go as it is. The first time I actually had to delete it.
Was this the one I participated in?
No, this was this past Saturday. So. I'm assuming you more so than I would have. You know what an employer value proposition is, correct?
Indeed.
An EVP. So first clue that this may not have gone as I was hoping was I didn't know what that was until like 3 months ago. Like I've been recruiting for 15 years. Like I vaguely heard it. I don't actually know what it was, right? Until I started talking to some people who were big into employer brand. But the reason why I wanted to make fun of it was because I didn't realize how much companies pay for these things. Like 5-6 figures for like 2 paragraphs of kind of fluffy text. Like There's not anything to it. And they get suckered into thinking like this is something they need to like spend a ton of money on. So I just think the whole thing is ridiculous and no one reads these things, You
of all people, you don't like puppy dogs and ice cream. Huh?
No, it's just, and the thing is, I think that employer brand is really important. I just think that it's your messaging is going to have to evolve, and the fact that you would pay somebody else that much money. Anyway, so I thought the troll was this. I was going to post that I had an idea for, like the old like BuzzFeed quizzes, like which Harry Potter house are you?
Yeah.
Or what? Or the old one. What was the thing? Like what's your pimp or porn star name? Like the name of your pet with the name of your street. You know what I mean? Just make it silly. So I'm like, I posted like I'm gonna do a value service to everyone who's sick of paying all this money for employer value propositions. I'm gonna write your EVP for free, and all I need from you is a few questions. So I started out.
How did I miss this?
I started out with a couple serious questions, like actual things you would ask in terms of where is your company going to be in 10 years from now if you're successful. But then it immediately went into like, what street did you grow up on? Are you a Gryffindor, Slytherin? You know what I mean? So it's clearly a joke. And then at the end, I think I said, it made some joke about it. It really doesn't matter if it's any good or not because no one's going to read it, right? The only replies I got were people actually seriously interested in me writing their EVP and like messaging me, answering the questions. And I realized at that moment in time, I've made a great error.
How do we monetize this?
I actually felt bad because I'm like, dude, I was joking.
Well, I think this is going to segue into.
I thought it was clear, but apparently not. But then I honestly felt bad. And technically speaking, I always talk about how it's a troll post. It actually is probably the first real troll post because the whole point of a troll is like making people think you're serious when you're joking and fooling them. But it wasn't what I was going for. I actually deleted it, so I did save an image of it if you want to check it out later. So
okay,
yeah, I might post it with a clip of this. But
I'm usually on top of your stuff.
Yeah, it didn't last long, so okay. It's a little. I felt bad, but anyway. Also, I just hate when the jokes don't land, but whatever. So segue.
Listen, you've got a good hit rate. I mean, if one falls flat, you're still doing all right.
So, so we did have a few topics we wanted to talk about in a slightly more serious manner because these are kind of things that we get questions from clients, from people we talk to, from candidates, people we talk to on LinkedIn, just general trends we're seeing. And the first was what you do, because we see this a lot. What do you do when you interview somebody you really, really like? Like you just love this job seeker, great candidate. The position doesn't fit, or you don't have a position, right? What do you do in those kind of situations? Because we see it happen quite some often. We also see a lot of companies not do a very good job with it, and it's a great long-term kind of candidate pipeline situation. So that's kind of what I want to lead off with. I think it's you've probably seen a lot of this. I'm kind of curious, like what your thoughts are in those situations.
By and large, I think the overarching theme for this exact scenario is, listen, there's something that's attracting you to the candidate, right?
Mm-hmm.
maybe you have an ill-defined job description. Maybe you don't have full buy-in across the board, but in a scenario where predominantly speaking, everybody on the panel is like, yeah, this individual is a great fit. I mean, it's easy for me as the recruiter to say, hire that person and figure it out later. But that's kind of my answer. It's, if you've got 70 to 80% of the way there, and this candidate has maybe given you some information that, like, wow, they're going to fill a few other gaps that I didn't even know existed, that's value add.
Yeah.
And I think that at the end of the day, no job description is going to encapsulate A, a perfect human being, B, a resume, or C, the actual job that's going to happen, because it's going to fluctuate over time.
Yeah.
And I think companies get a little tripped up by that.
I agree. I think there's kind of two sides to it. So first off, there's everything you're talking about, where are you as a hiring company just overthinking it? Like, does this person can they actually do the job? And you wrote something on paper saying these are all the things you want, not having an idea, are all these requirements realistic to find? And then how many times have we seen 3 months later they can't find it because it was never realistic. It was just something they kind of invented.
Yep.
And then they're back to square one and kicking themselves for not moving forward with the candidates they had that were good. And those guys are no longer interested because they were just turned off by how boneheaded the decision was in the first place, or they weren't kept warm, which is the bigger thing.
And conversely, and I would argue the most detrimental is a company that was potentially a competitor or was just a little bit more nimble, actually did scoop up that and picked up a ton of value from that individual.
I think that there's a second side of it too, because the other thing we see is there's a lot of situations where they like two candidates, right? They only had one position, they had like two candidates, or they like three candidates. Like they keep meeting people they thought were great, but they just don't have the headcounts. That's kind of separate. So a lot of times it's not just a poor hiring decision where they punted because they weren't thinking they overthought it. It's, sometimes if you're mandating that you talk to 4 or 5 people, you end up liking more than one.
Yeah.
And if you're a company that's growing where you're going to have more needs for this person, you don't have the budget right now. Like there's definitely limitations, and you can't just bring on everybody just because you want to. Like you have to have the business need for it. In those situations where you've met people that are great, for some reason someone else got the job, but you do have legitimate interest in kind of keeping them in mind, I guess, how do you play that?
I'm going to start by saying that I could get on a soapbox right now about you brought up the mandated number of people to screen. Don't do that. I think that once you see the person that you invariably like, or a collection of individuals that you like, my advice is to make a decision. The market is hot enough now for the type of talent that that's going to improve the quality of your team to the point where you're going to have to make that call because somebody else will. The window shopping approach it doesn't work. In theory, yes, you want to have like the ability to get a deal or to find the right person, but invariably, again, the analogy works because the more you window shop, the more sales you miss, and then you're back to paying full price.
I'm thinking of it like from a long-term talent pipelining approach, right? So, like I said, there's always going to be situations where there's more people that you like that someone you think could be part of the organization, but you're a small startup, you don't have the budget to afford it. What do you do in those situations? And I think that I want to say that I think that if you're the companies that have the easiest time of hiring, the way they do it is by doing long-term pipelining, where they build relationships with people they could see join the organization when they have the opening in the future. Every time you have to stop and restart recruiting, it's a drag on both your resources and, if you've already kind of vetted some people previously or built relationships with people previously, it makes it that much easier to kind of not have to spend as much time and money on that kind of stuff in the future. But I guess I want to underscore it with is this is not really a recruiter thing. This is more of a hiring manager thing.
Absolutely.
If you're a business, whether you're in technology or marketing or any other aspect of business, and you take your deliverable seriously, you have to know that having the people to help you execute on that, and it's not just a short-term thing and what's going to help me do whatever I need to do this quarter. It's going to be thinking 2-3 years out. You always need to at least know and network people who can kind of add value.
It's a great point. I think, and I think where you're going with this is what's the messaging to the non-selected candidate that very clearly would be a fit for something in the very near future or intermediate future, especially for a growing company. But the analogy works for larger organizations too. The companies that are winning the talent war not only are nimble at the point of inception, right? Like they're ready to make the hire now, but they're communicating transparently with those pipelines on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
You talked about employer brand, like there's your brand. You've got recruiters and hiring managers, constantly following up and talking to you as a candidate about what's going on in the business.
Yeah.
It's a good feeling. Humans like to feel wanted, and if you have that constant communication, that's going to take you farther into the realm of when you're ready to hire that candidate, they're ready to jump on board.
Absolutely. I think that it starts with one, if you had a position that you ended up not moving forward with them on, making sure that the hiring manager, or whoever the hiring manager, him or her, thanks, gives very clear feedback. So like it has to be very specific in terms of, they're going to understand as long as you're being specific and the feedback is genuine. If you had someone else that had a better match, like they'll get it, but it has to be coming from a place of it's not just kind of lip service.
Sure.
Two, you have to keep that line of communication open. Again, this is why you don't just want your recruiter HR shooting people emails saying, sorry, we're not moving forward. Sure. This is why you have to actually sit down with someone. I've had work with companies that, they'll actually meet with people they don't end up going forward with in person, having coffee and saying, hey, let's stay in touch for something like this when it comes up in the future. When you look at pipelining as building relationships for when times are right, like, hey, they know that as a hiring manager, that these candidates might have other things they end up doing. But taking that extra step makes it easier in case, like, you just never know, where life is going to lead, where it might make sense to kind of bring them on at some point in the future when it's mutually beneficial. So
yeah, I'd be shocked if a lot of the comments that arise from this, center around the stock communication that companies get stuck into, or I think a lot of candidates that at least I talk to, and probably you as well, and I think the rest of the company here, is the idea of having just an expectation. Like, when am I going to follow up? When, and what will that messaging be? Just setting a template for how that follow-up is going to look like feels, it helps a candidate, understand kind of what the timetable is, but it gives them a touch point. It gives them some sort of structure to that relationship.
Yeah.
And it's just these little tiny things that matter a lot in keeping those sorts of candidates not only engaged, but very much interested in like what you're doing and the types of people that they could potentially work for.
Sure. I know it's time for a segue. I know we were really excited, hotly, interested in this next topic. Yep. So I don't know. Kind of the way they laid this up was I posted something on LinkedIn talking about problems in the staffing and recruiting industry, and it got a lot of play. So what was interesting is I had a lot of third-party recruiters reaching out to me. Glad that I kind of went off on the rant that I did, because they thought that their experience might have been unique and didn't realize that doesn't have to be the way it is. So I guess I've been with Hirewell for 15 years now, and it's been a great environment to be in. And it's been a while since I was in like a bad environment, but it's kind of two things. One, it's always irked me how our industry has a bad name and bad reputation. Like,
Same.
The biggest challenge for Hirewell is not delivering and not getting clients to trust us and like our service. It's just getting in the door that first time, because so many people have gotten burned by a bad experience with so many recruiting firms. They just assume it's always going to be that kind of experience. And let me first start by saying not every recruiting firm is terrible, but there's a lot that are, and they're typically the larger firms for various reasons. It's just an industry that
I think it's important to note too that even within, like, we're talking, so generally, like, there's still individuals in those companies that are exceptional recruiters.
And that's honestly been part of our hiring models. We find people who are exceptional in these firms that are just kind of burned out, but there's the challenge is, the problem is there's such a short-term focus on immediate revenue at a lot of these larger places. A lot of them some of them might be public. Some of them might have, frankly, greedy owners that are completely disconnected from the service delivery and just don't care.
Correct.
as opposed to focusing on solving client problems and solving problems for the companies they're kind of doing on staffing on behalf of. And the easy metric to follow is the old school boiler room metrics, where if you just focus on activity numbers and focus on and the idea that if we make our recruiters compete against each other and eat each other, the cream's going to rise to the top. We're going to have the best service for our clients, but it's a completely flawed ideology. What it really does is create environments where people are focused on metrics that are meaningless, meaning, maybe it's still 100 calls a day, or maybe it's 30 quote unquote interactions, where, when you start making arbitrary numbers, and people are in trouble if they don't hit those numbers. It makes it more about just having kind of BS interactions that aren't meaningful.
Correct.
Instead of actually having like good, genuine relationships built. And then it kind of goes downhill from there. Then it becomes, you're working with certain clients, you're a recruiter, all you care about is getting people submitted to jobs. So you submit anybody to the job. So then you got job seekers getting all pissed off because you're submitting them to places that turns out they really weren't a fit for, might have wasted their time, bringing them into the office, talking with them, might have wasted their time on the phone.
Total sideway, but yes, that's correct.
So like from the job seeker perspective, they're talking to recruiters who might be doing a terrible job and speaking with them about irrelevant stuff, reaching out to them about irrelevant jobs, which is the big one.
For hiring managers out there, I think a lot of you are probably privy to this, but there are still organizations out there that have a quota for the amount of people that have to arbitrarily walk into the office and meet with our recruiters.
Yeah.
That is not us.
Yeah. But then taking it from the client side, this is also why the service level is so poor. So if you're a company and you're used to getting candidates that just don't fit the job submitted to you, it's because there's an unnecessary quota on the recruiting firm you're working with, the internal recruiters, to submit people to jobs, or otherwise they're fired. And there's also another thing that's always got me too is the amount of overselling that happens. People are in such desperation to make their monthly numbers, and they may not have actually found any candidates that fit a job. So they'll just try to convince companies that are maybe not as attuned to the market and what's actually a need, and they don't know what the candidate market's supposed to look like, and they're convinced that this so-and-so who doesn't really have the background they need fits, and then things blow up at some point in the future.
Yep. Frustration becomes threefold. Client is unhappy because they're not seeing the right profile. Recruiter's unhappy because, frankly, they're running around like a chicken with their head cut off and spending time on more than likely non-revenue generating activities. And the candidate's irked because the recruiter can't really give a clear answer as to why they weren't a fit, because the role wasn't qualified well in the first place.
Yeah. So these are the musings I have.
Let it out.
Because I've been doing this for a long time. I love the recruiting process. I love working with companies. I like helping people in their roles. And I think there's a lot of great recruiters out there that work for firms that aren't great, and they're being put needlessly in these kind of situations. And part of me likes the fact that a lot of our competitors aren't good, right? Because it makes it easier to kind of stand out. But at the same time, too, it's I feel for anyone who has to deal with a bad experience, whether there's someone working at one of these companies that like having this career, but are stressed out of their mind. Yeah. And a lot of them just quit. They just get into something different thinking.
My story.
Yeah.
I burned out and went corporate for almost a decade.
They think that this is all that recruiting is working at these awful boiler room environments. And you got candidates who are getting sick of getting contacted about jobs that are nowhere near their experience, or getting ghosted by recruiters and whatnot. And then you got clients that are just fed up with mediocre experience, and frankly, they just assume that's all that's out there, and they continue to struggle in hiring because, they inadvertently shut themselves off to working with firms that actually are good. So
right, and to the hiring managers out there, we understand that it's hard to discern, who's what, and I would say that when you have those intake calls and when you're talking to the salespeople, you're talking to folks like James or his counterparts in the industry. Dig into the business acumen. It's all about can you understand a problem? Can you be solutions oriented, or does it feel like we're just going to kind of throw resumes at the wall?
I think
that's the big difference.
Yeah, no, I think that on the marketing, I can talk deepest about, I guess, the digital marketing space, since that's what I've been most involved with the past 4 or 5 years. But I think that as a recruiter, I guess as a hiring manager, if you're trying to figure out if the recruiter you're working with knows their stuff or not, how deep can they actually get into these jobs, right? How deep can they get in terms of understanding your business deliverables as well as the latest trends, and what can they relate this back to people they've talked to and what environments they've come from, beyond surface level keywords, because that's when you're talking with someone who's actually taking care with trying to solve people's problems, that's going to do a good job for you regardless of what firm they're working with. And I think that's probably the easiest way to vet, just understanding how closely they really understand what it is you do and what exactly your business deliverables are, and is this someone that has demonstrated they can help me get there. So
yeah, sure. Yeah, the best recruiters ask enough questions to understand kind of like how these ecosystems work within each individual silo. So I agree.
All right. Anything else you want to complain about on this one?
Well, let's see. I'm looking up at the board. I've been in the boiler room. I've done the busy work. I did burn out. It's nice to be back at a place that I think values solutions oriented, kind of, business focused, like problem solving. And to James's point, if you're not talking to somebody that you feel has that, stop that conversation.
One more topic for today. And I know I don't even know if I have a real definitive stance on this one. It's just how things,
I do, which
it's
is
more,
great.
I want to hear your stance. Because it's just how things have changed is what really fascinates me over the past, 15 years or so. Job hopping. Is that still a thing? What is job hopping now compared to what job hopping used to be, right?
I'm a job hopper.
How long have you been with us now?
Well, I'm working on 5, and that's easily my longest tenure.
Previous to that, you were definitely a job hopper.
Previously, I was a frog. Yes. Listen, my feelings on this is, I think there's a lot of societal pressure from, our parents' generation had, listen, they had things like pensions, and there was a safety net. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of incentive to stay at companies long term, and from a societal structure, it made sense. I get why, my parents stayed at their places of work for long periods of time. It was, fulfilling and all mm-hmm. of these good things. As you know, and the rest of Hirewell kind of knows, that model has changed a little bit. I kind of dig, my whole team is a group of millennials and Gen Zers, as yours is, mm-hmm. and I like the idea that they won't just say, well, hey, this is the way we've always done it, so I'm going to kind of just fall and step in line. And it kind of gets back to the whole point of what we were talking about in question 1 is, if you're a company that's nimble enough to recognize those tiny little shifts and add the extra $2K to the offer package, or add an extra work from home incentive, these little things, mm-hmm. the likelihood of you securing that talent is just going to exponentially increase. And conversely, if you're not offering that, you're putting yourself at risk to these folks, which is on the cusp of being the largest portion of the employment pool, to saying buzz off.
I think it's kind of fascinating from a generational perspective, because if our parents' generation, or the people who are you're getting nearing retirement age right now, or people who have retired, it was common in those days for people to work with their career all at one company. But you and I probably grew up aware of that. And
we're in the middle.
And knowing that's not normal anymore. But when you take it, people who are getting out of school now, that's an absurd thought. They it's the idea you would stay your whole career at one company. It's not even something that they don't have memory of that growing up, right? So
they're wait, companies exist for more than 20 years?
Yeah, it's how can you have long-term commitments to companies the way you used to, when if you go back and look at companies that a lot of the biggest companies in the world didn't exist more than 20 years ago. I should have brought some stats up on this one, but there's companies go out of business or get acquired, and there's just not the level of loyalty to employees. And I shouldn't say loyalty; it's just the rapid pace of change. Yeah. So I think that if you're an employee, having blind loyalty to a company is a detriment to your career, because companies are constantly innovating. They're always constantly trying to find the new thing. And if you're not taking that same mentality about what you're doing with yourself, and if a company allows you to do that, allows you to kind of develop yourself, then you should stay. But I think that's the biggest reason why people should look for new positions nowadays, is that they're no longer being challenged, that whatever they were hired to do, whatever they're hired to build, has already been done. And
Right.
if that's once that happens, like you're just in maintain mode,
Yep.
And I think that because breaking this down, if you look at different industries, there's still things that are some very different. So anybody who works in a startup, that's I don't think there's really expectation for if you're a developer, somebody in a startup, you're going to be at these places very long, but. There's still, I guess, the reason why we're having this conversation, there's still that bias at some companies, right? The larger organizations that they want people with longer tenures. But the argument could easily be made if you're trying to hire a software dev or a marketer or somebody who has an innovative mind, how could they have possibly been at the same company for an extended amount of time?
Correct. Yeah, it's the classic catch-22. We're talking about fulfillment, and I think all humans want to be fulfilled, and the definition of fulfillment from a societal standpoint has changed over time.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that right now it's about innovation, and it's about the fulfillment can, to your point, happen from within.
Mm-hmm.
Good candidates are going to, and employees are going to stay at companies that provide good benefits, whatever that case may be. They make it specialized so that it feels uniquely that it's that employees,
Mm-hmm.
and that they're challenged. And if you don't have like a good mix of those three things, again, you're at risk again.
Yeah.
So we're going to see more of this. So unfortunately, like even if you are anti-job hopping,
Yeah.
you're kind of SOL anyways,
Yeah,
because
well,
that's going to be the profile that you're going to continually look at.
True. Well, I think it was. I mean, here's the thing. So taking it back a step, and to give the other counterpoint to it, there are people in society who are flaky. There's always
For
going to be
sure.
people who are just not very good at their job. They flake out, and those people are going to be job hoppers most of the time.
Indeed.
So like that, there is a profile like that exists. But the problem is that profile side by side with the profile of someone who's really good and just wants to innovate, on paper, it's going to look the same.
Yep.
So, and that's why it's something I think you need to be aware if somebody made a lot of job moves, but by no means should that be a reason why you should rule them out without having a much deeper, definitive conversation, because you need to truly understand why they made these moves. Was it because they built? Did they accomplish what they came to do? Did they finish creating what they created? Did they have good references? Like, did they work at good places that they were fulfilled at, or did they flame out? Did they get frankly fired or whatever for poor performance? Which is going to be hard to vet sometimes. But those are the things you kind of be more in tune to. But I think that the evolution of it is interesting, because like I was going to say that. When I started, a 2 to 3 year job stint was like you were a job hopper 20 years ago. Now that's like normal.
Well, and not to say, again, these are all generalities, right? I don't want anyone to watch this and say, oh my gosh, that's me, because again, we're all talking about generalities. But there's plenty of people out there who have worked at their organizations for 8, 10, 12 years, and you could make a counterpoint that why haven't they moved? Have they gotten stagnant? Have they just gotten comfortable? Again, that is a stigma that exists, and it may be completely false.
I don't want to name any company names, but there's definitely been candidates that we've worked with where the company had a strong bias against them because they stayed too long at certain companies that are known as not being very innovative. So why did this person stay there of all places? You know? So that is also kind of the anti-bias in kind of the entire thing. So
I think smart people in all levels of this spectrum, so candidate, hiring manager, us, everybody involved, pragmatism wins the day. Like if you think about it logically, and you are resourceful enough to go out and find the information, to your point, this particular organization has obviously ID'd some other organizations that may not be as innovative.
Yeah.
And that's probably a pretty legit data point.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that every single person working there is like that, but you have to be aware of it as a
But it's another
candidate.
conversation you have to have.
Indeed.
Like I think that I guess my big takeaway, and one thing I want to kind of hammer home on this, is that with where we are now, with the state of kind of tenures at companies, you can't use tenure alone as a reason to disqualify anybody, whether it's too short or too long.
Sure.
You have to have conversations with people and understand truly what it is they're about, why they made the moves they make, why they didn't make the moves they make, what kept them at companies. And these are the higher these are real conversations you have to have. So some places, the old method 20 years ago of like, hey, if someone was a job hopper, you know what I mean, or even go back further, is like, okay, let's throw them in the trash pile in terms of resume. You just can't do that anymore because.
Right.
So I guess, taking it back, like,
look at you going full circle all the way back
full
to
circle,
point 1, 2.
Full circle. You have to, I think that's the biggest thing with recruiting, really kind of on all these topics, is we talk a lot about candidate experience, and I think that it's really more of the quality of the interaction you have with people to really understand what they're about. And understanding how they could fit or not fit in your organization is what the better companies have figured out they need to do, as opposed to being obsessed with volume, automation to rule people out, or automation to let people know they're ruled out, making snap judgments based just off resumes. And at the end of the day, I guess that's not even a theme I realized we had for this whole thing.
Yeah.
Look back.
It goes back to the whole point of, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, but the relationship building from both the recruiter and the organizational hiring manager perspective is just so key. And being able to walk through each individual specific narrative is really important to digging into, whether or not somebody's a flake or just, hasn't been challenged, and every other, comparison point in between.
Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about this week while you have the floor?
I'm very enthused that you started this show with Fish, the band Fish.
We'll have to see, because that came in through the LinkedIn Live. We have to see if we can, on the podcast remix, we'll have to see if we can get the same song put in.
I couldn't. The more Fish and jam bands, in general, the better.
Awful.
I think. I'm sorry.
I don't think I could name a single Fish song.
That's okay. I don't think you would have a very
aside from
good
the one I
time at a
downloaded
Fish
just
show.
today, just for you. So
we do have. Listen, we're in a good place with other types of music, but I'm very excited about that, and that's really all I have to offer in closing.
Well, next time we have you, you'll have to give me a new track next time.
Okay.
We'll make it a recurring thing.
Oh, there's 450 of them. So.
We have a lot of podcasts.
We can just do a whole podcast of 20-minute Fish jams, if you want.
No.
Fair enough.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening to Hirewell's Recruiting Insights podcast. If you like what you heard and want more insights from our recruiting experts, visit hirewell.com/recruiting-insights. And remember to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. See you soon.